Hi, today I wanted to show you something that I did a few days back, and it's basically this little Livewire component made with Tailwind CSS and AlpineJS, and it's a card component but has an integrated carousel of images. So I thought that was pretty cool, and obviously I want you to have it as well. So what I have here is basically an empty Laravel project with no starter kit or anything else. And we are going to install Tailwind CSS, Livewire, and we are going to create a small component that you can basically reuse on any of your projects. So the first thing I'm going to do is install the local dependencies. I'm going to use bun, but you can use npm instead. So in my case, it'll be bun install. And then I'm going to bring Tailwind CSS into this project. So let's do bun install -d Tailwind CSS post CSS and auto prefixer. And then I'm going to initialize Tailwind CSS using bunx Tailwind CSS init-p. And that will create two configuration files, and we are going to edit those right away. Okay, let's close this terminal and let's open tailwind.config.js. And in the content section, I'm going to add this line so that every blade.php file will be analyzed by Tailwind CSS and generate all the CSS classes that I need. Okay, save this and then open app.css, which is in resources, CSS app.css, and let's add these 3 lines to basically configure Tailwind CSS and all of its components. Okay, that's all we need to do for Tailwind, and now we're going to install Livewire. So open the terminal and then use composer require Livewire. Okay, now that this is installed, let's clear the screen, and we're going to create a component that is going to house our carousel card. So let's do PHP artisan make Livewire carousel card. This will create 2 files, the class, which is in app Livewire carousel card.php, and the view, which is in resources views Livewire carousel card.blade.php. Now let's open the routes file, which is called web.php, located in routes web.php, and I'm going to use this route here to display my component as a full page Livewire component. And all I have to do is provide the class name, which is carousel card class. But in order for this to work, we have to create a layout file that Livewire will use automatically when displaying full page Livewire components. So let's do PHP artisan Livewire layout. This will create a new file in resources, views, components, layouts, app.blade.php. So let's take a look at that file real quick. So the only thing that is missing here is the vit directive, because we are going to use vit to compile our local assets. So right below the title, let's do vit. And for now, let's just pass resources, CSS app.css. And I think we are ready to open this in the web browser. So let's open a terminal and let's do PHP artisan serve. And let's open a new terminal and do bun run dev. And this will start a new vit development server. And now let's close this and move to the browser and navigate to localhost 8000. And right now we have an empty screen because the template for the component is empty, but just to show you that it's working, let's go back to the code and open the template of the component, which is called carousel card.blade.php. And let's add something here like hello world. And you can see now that it is showing on the web browser. So now we are ready to start building our component, or at least the skeleton or the scaffold of the component. So let's delete this. And let's start by adding a couple of div elements. This one will house the carousel. So let's add a couple of comments here. And another one down here, which will hold the card description down below the carousel. And for the carousel section, we're going to need one div that is going to hold the images. And then let's add a couple of buttons for navigation. We're going to use these buttons to navigate left and right or back and forth between the images. And finally, we are going to add another div down here, which will be for adding navigation items like small little buttons just below the images to serve as both indicators of how many images we have in the carousel and also navigation as well. And for those indicators, I'm going to use span elements, and we're going to have, just for now, for testing, let's add at least 3 of them. Now for the image, let's add another div that is going to be the framing of the image. Then another div that is going to serve as the background color. And then finally, another image or another div that is going to be the actual image. So for this div, let's use style background image URL. And here I'm going to use a random image that I got from Unsplash. And I'm going to duplicate this a couple of times and then change the image source. You don't have to worry too much about this part. This is just basically for testing and just to get a feel of the sign of the component. Now let's change this last one, and that's it. Okay, let's save this and see how it's looking. And obviously we can't see anything yet because none of the divs have any content, so there is nothing to see yet. So let's start by adding some of the styles, starting with the root element. So for this, we are going to use flex call. Let's give it a full height with h full, and let's give it a minimum height of 72, which is around 288 pixels. Now for mid-size screens, let's give it a minimum height of 96, which is 384 pixels. And now let's use BG white for a white background, and then shadow SM, so it has a bit of a shadow and pops out a bit from the page. Let's also make it rounded with rounded XL. And in case we are seeing this in dark mode, let's use dark, BG gray, let's say 900, and save. And we can see some changes, and because my system it's using dark mode by default, it's picking that up from the system and I don't have to do anything. Okay, let's work on the carousel. Let's use flex call, and flex one, justify center, items center, and then relative, and save that. No visible changes. And then let's work on the next div. This will have h full, width full, BG white for white background. Let's also round this, but we are going to round it only on the top corners. So let's do rounded TXL, and let's give it a border and change the border color to gray 200. And for dark mode, let's change the border color to gray 900. Or actually, let's use, that seems to be too dark, so let's use maybe gray 50, but with an opacity of 10%. I think that looks better. And for the background, let's use dark, BG gray, and 900 as well. And let me format this a little better so that it is easier to see. Maybe move this class over here and this one down here as well. And maybe break all of these down. Okay, it's not my favorite format, but at least it's easier to see in a smaller screen. Okay, let's save this. And at least we have this line here, which will be the divider between the content of the card and the images. And also let's work on the container itself, because I don't want it to expand to the whole page. I want it to be centered. So for that, we're going to modify the template, or actually the layout. So let's go back to app.play.php, and down here, let's add a div that will serve as a wrapper. And let's put slot inside, and let's add class, and let's give it a max width of maybe something specific. Let's say 80 rem. And then MX auto to center that on the page. And that doesn't seem to be doing anything. Let's use a number instead, maybe something really high. Let's go with 96 maybe. Okay, that worked better. Now let's add a little bit of padding, maybe padding X4, and then padding Y. 6. Okay, it's looking better now. Okay, back to the carousel card. Let's work on this div, and let's do class. And you know, I think I added one extra div here. So let's just take these 3, which are the images, take them out and just delete that div. So it looks like this. Okay, so this div will have flex, justify center, H full, and then BG gray 100. Save that. And finally, we are going to work on the divs that contain the images. So I'm going to use 3 courses here to save some time, and then do class BG cover, BG center, BG no repeat, and then H full with full. Let's clear the padding on this with padding 0. Let's give it a minimum height of 52, which is 208 pixels. And for medium size screens, let's do minimum height of 80. Which is 320 pixels. Okay, let me format this as well. Okay, let's save this and see how it looks. And it's not looking great. All I'm seeing is white. Let me check real quick. And it looks like the images, or at least the code is there, but it's failing to load the images as HTTPS URLs or directly from Unsplash. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to real quick go and download those images and put them in my project, and then I'll come back and see the results. So be right back. Okay, we are back, and through the magic of editing, I took a moment to go to unsplash.com and downloaded a couple of images, 3 images to be precise, and put those on my project folder. And just to show you what I did, first of all, I put all of my images in storage app public, and those are called, or I renamed them, image 1, image 2, and image 3. And then to make those available as a public asset, I went to the terminal and ran php artisan storage link. And that command will create a symlink in your public folder called storage, and that will be a replica of the folder inside storage app public. They contain the exact same files. And then after that, I went back to my carousel card template and replaced the value for the URL in each of the divs with storage image 1, image 2, and image 3. But then I realized that I only need one image at a time, because we are going to use AlpineJS and the buttons that we created to switch between all of the images. So what I'm going to do is just get rid of maybe 2 of these, like so, and that will leave us with just one image. Okay, that's better. Now let's real quick work on the navigation buttons. Let's add class here. And just to anticipate, I'm going to format this the way I want to. And then obviously let's make this a type button. And let's use absolute inset 0, or actually is inset y 0, start 0, and then inline flex. And I forgot to make this like so. And now justify center, items center. Let's give it a width of exactly 46 pixels. Then h full, text gray, 900. And we also want a hover effect on this. So let's do hover, text gray, or actually BG gray, 900 and 0.1. And this has to be a specific value. So that'll have a background of 900, but it's going to make it semi-transparent. Okay, so since this is going to be a button that is going to be touching the border, we want that button to be rounded on the top left corner. So let's do rounded, top left, XL. And I'm going to grab these 2 properties, copy them, and then apply them to the other button as well. The only difference is that instead of start, we're going to do end, so that it's going to be completely on the right side. And then we're going to change rounded top right XL. And that basically gives us these 2 sections here where we hover, and these are going to serve as buttons to navigate forwards and backwards in the carousel. But I think we should have also like a couple of icons, maybe a chevron right and left, so that we can clearly see what the button is for. So as the content of the first button, let's do span, and let's say class text to XL. And I'm going to quickly go to hero icons and then look for chevron. Okay, this, I'm going to copy the SVG for the one on the left side and then paste it here. And to the SVG, I'm going to give it a class of h6 with 6. Let's save that. And yeah, there it is, the little chevron, but it looks a little too heavy. So let's change the color of the text, and let's do it on the button itself. Let's do gray 600 maybe. Yeah, a little better. Okay, now let's do the same thing, but on the right side. Again, I'm gonna copy this SVG from hero icons, and then back to the code, and add that to the content of the second button. Again, with a class of with 6 h6. Oh, and the text color as well. All right, much better. And on the second button, I missed the span element to make it text, sorry, class text to XL. So put the SVG inside that span. And also, since we want to make this accessible, let's add another span below that and give it a class of SR only. And since this is going to be the button for next, let's add the text next in here. And actually, let's move this span below or above the first one, like so. And then let's copy this one and add it to the first button, this time below the span. And this is going to be for previous. And just in case you're curious, SR only stands for screen reader only. So it's going to be invisible in the page. But if the user uses some kind of screen reader software, it's going to read that out loud, the word previous and next. Okay, save that. Still looking good. Okay, now let's work on this spans here. Starting with the div, let's do class, flex, justify, center, absolute. Let's do minus, bottom 5, start 0 and 0, and then space x2. And for each of these spans, I'm going to do class, border, let's do blue 600, and then on dark mode, let's do border amber 600. And let's do rounded full, so to make it a full circle, and then cursor pointer, so that the cursor will change whenever we're hovering the element. All right, let's format this. And just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to make the first item to be to have a background, so it's full, and that will demonstrate the active element on the list. So let's do BG blue 600, and then dark BG amber 600. Let's save this. And they're there, but they are way too small. Like 3 minor mini dots. Maybe I forgot to, yeah, we should give them a width to all of them. So maybe width 3 and H3. Copy this, paste it here and here as well. Okay, much better. Now, right now it's below the card, but once the card has some content in it, it's going to be just below the picture. And we are going to use this as navigation as well to jump to specific pictures in the carousel. Okay, scrolling down, I think we're ready to work on the content of the card, which is this div right here. Let's do class and then padding 4. And for medium size screens, let's do padding 6. Now, since the card already has a border below the image, which serves as a divider, the part below it, I only want to have a border on both sides and on the bottom. So for that, I'm going to use border X and then also border B. So border X will give the container a border on both left and right, and border B will give the container a border on the bottom. Okay, for the border color, I think we were using gray 200, and then for dark, that'll be border, if I'm not mistaken, gray 50 divided by 10, I think. Yeah, I think that's it. So dark BG gray 900. And let's also make this rounded, but I only want it to be rounded on the bottom corner. So rounded BXL. Okay, for the actual content of the card, let's do span class log margin bottom 1 text XS font semi-bold, transform this to uppercase, and then text blue 600, and for dark text amber 600. And let's make this to be the card title. Let's save that. See how it's looking. Much better. But I'm noticing a problem here with the image, which is protruding on the corner. So we should make those corners rounded as well. So let's fix that. Scroll up to the div that contains the image right here. And let's make this rounded top XL. And that didn't do the trick. Well, actually I have to spell rounded as it should be, and it's looking a little better. But there is still one more element that needs to be rounded, and I think this is this one div which has a background of gray. So let's do rounded here as well. Top XL. All right, much better. Okay, now let's give some text content to the card down here below the span that we just created. Let's do H3 text XL font semi-bold. Text gray, let's do maybe 800 to make it a little bit softer. And then on dark mode, let's do text gray 300. And then for the actual content, let's do some gibberish like so. Let me break this down a bit, save it. And yeah, it's looking a little good, but the text, I think it's too big. Maybe text LG. All right, that's better. And you can play around. If you don't like the content to be bigger than the title, you can just swipe those and make the card title bigger and then the text a little bit smaller. But yeah, the design is looking good. All we need to do now is add the functionality to move between images, and we are going to do a combination of AlpineJS for the button navigations, and also we're going to store the images as an array in our Livewire component. Okay, first thing we're going to do is open the component class located in app Livewire carousel card.php, and we're going to create a property called images. Let's make that public, and this is going to be initialized with all of the images that we currently have. Usually I'm going to initialize it here, but what you would want to do in a normal situation is maybe you have those images in a database, and when you mount the component, you get all of those images and place them in an array. But for now, for this example, I'm just going to use static values for image1.jpg, and then image2, and finally image 3. And as soon as you define a public property in your Livewire component, that is immediately available to the components template. So let's go back to the card carousel.blade.php. Let's scroll all the way up to the root element here. And let's format this a little bit more. And now let's initialize AlpineJS with x-data. And here we are going to define whatever we need for the components functionality. So for example, we are going to need the array of images, which we are going to get from the actual component class. And what we can do to translate the array from the components class into a JavaScript array, we can use the JavaScript support class JS, and then use from. And here we can use the images property, which is the public images property from the class. Then we are going to need a couple more variables here, maybe the currently selected index of the image. We are going to initialize that as 0. And then we are going to need a couple of methods. One is for moving forward or to move to the previous and next images. So let's start with next image. And what we want to do here is to increase the index of the selected image. We can do that with this selected, which refers to this variable here. and we can do plus plus. And then we're going to do a check, because if we move to the next image, but that image is the last one, then we wrap around and go back to the beginning. So if this selected is equals to this image's length, then we set this selected back to 0. And now let's do something similar with the previous image method. So previous image, and in this case we're going to do this selected minus minus to decrease 1, and then do another check. So if this selected is less than 0, that means we are at the beginning of the carousel. So if we decrease 1 or go to the previous one, then we go to the end. So in this case, we're going to say this selected equals to this image's length minus 1. And now what we can do is to make use of these two properties. We scroll down to the buttons that we created right here. And on the first one, which is the one that we used to move to the previous image, we use x-on click equals next, or actually no, previous image. And then we do the same thing on the next button, but in this case it's going to be the next image method. Okay, let's save this, verify that there are no errors, and let's give it a try. And it looks like it's not working, and I guess it's because we still haven't bound the value of the background image to what we have in the component. So let's do that. Let's scroll up and let's find this property here, the style. And in this case, we need to do x-bind. And for the value, we are going to use backticks in the beginning and the end. And then we can replace image1.jpg with $, and this will escape the value of the variable into the string. And in this case, we need images. And for the index, we use selected. And just so if you didn't know, backticks is basically just a way in JavaScript to output a string, but being able to escape variables within that string without having to use concatenates and plus, etc. Similar to what you do in PHP with double quotes and including variables inside double quoted strings. And let's save this and give it a try. If we click next, we move to the next image. Perfect. And then we move one more to the end. And if we click next one more time, we go back to the beginning. Excellent. And same thing with the previous button. We push it a couple of times and it's working great. Awesome. Now let's implement this navigation here. We want to change the background to the image that is currently active, and also make use of these buttons to navigate to the different images. So let's scroll down all the way to where we have the spans. And in this case, instead of having to display 3 spans manually, we can use the array of images that we have in order to dynamically display each span depending on how many images we have. So I'm going to remove these 2 elements here, leaving just 1 span. And let's also add a template, just so that we don't iterate on the span element, but on a template that is going to be basically invisible. But AlpineJS will use that to iterate over the array. So here let's do x4 image, index in images, and let's not forget to move the span inside that template like so. And first let's implement the click method, so x-click, and all we want to do here is just to set the selected property to whatever index we are currently in. So selected equals index. And next we want to bind. So let's do x bind class equals. And what we're going to do here is to toggle the background of the image depending on whether we are on the current, whether the current index is equal to the selected image. So let's open and close brackets, and this is a string. What I'm going to do is grab the BG blue from here and put it up here, and also the one for dark mode. Remove it from here and place it here. And these two will be toggled depending on whether the next expression evaluates to true. And that expression will be index equals to selected. Okay, let's save this and see how it works. So if we use the navigation buttons and move to the next one, we can see that the background is toggled to the second image. And if we keep moving, then it moves to the third. And if we move one more over, it goes back to the beginning. Excellent. And now we can use these buttons to jump around. And that didn't work. Why didn't it work? Let's check the code. And oh, I did X click, and it's actually X on click, like so. All right, try it again. And now it's working. Perfect. And finally, let's just see how this looks on light mode, because right now we have only seen it on dark mode. So to do that, let's go back to the code. Let's open tailwind.config.js. And right here, let's switch the dark mode setting to class. So let's do dark mode to class, save it. And this is how it looks on light mode. Perfect. Okay, there you have it. A nice looking card component that you can use on any of your Laravel projects with Livewire or even Filament PHP. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.